Welcome to the Rant, and this is your author, Comic Killer 72 for Comic Power. This is the show where I talk in detail about one particular subject. It's going to be audio only, so you're going to get a static image, and it's basically going to be like a podcast that you're going to listen to. It's something that you would listen to while you're driving, working out, cleaning the house, something like that. So I'm just letting you know it's audio only up front. And today's subject is that Warner Brothers is potentially going to develop a Lobo live-action movie, and they're considering Micheal By in directing it. And I want to discuss about how this is a awful idea. I mean, tremendously awful, ridiculously awful. How many ways can I say awful? Okay, it's just a bad idea. So first of all, let's discuss who Lobo is in the first place so you have an idea about the character, because not everybody knows who he is. He's an anti-hero and an intergalactic mercenary and bounty hunter from the alien planet Zarnia. Is the C silent? I don't know. It looks like Czarnia. Someone please let me know if I'm pronouncing that right, if the C is silent or not. Either way. He was first introduced in Omega Man #3 in 1983. And throughout the 80s, DC didn't usually use this character that much. They really didn't know what to do with him. He got a resurgence in the early 1990s. They used him as a spoof against characters from Marvel like Cable, Wolverine, The Punisher. It was the dark age in comics where everything was grim and gritty and real dark, and those characters were just asking to be spoofed. So DC revamped the Lobo character and actually took this on. So he had these spikes and chains. He was extremely hairy. He had blue skin and red eyes, and it looked like he belonged in a biker gang. And he told these stories of his mercenary work that were completely ridiculous. For example, there's a story called Paramilitary Christmas, where he's contracted by the Easter Bunny to assassinate Santa Claus. So that just tells you what type of material we're talking about right now. So he's the original Merc with a mouth. If you think about that phrase, it's applied to Deadpool now, who was created in 1991. But at the time that he was created by Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza, he was more of your one-note bad guy of the month. He was not the Merc with the mouth that we know he is now. That version of Deadpool was created in 1997 by Joe Kelly because they gave the book to a newcomer. They had no idea that the book was going to be successful. They figured it would be canceled pretty soon, so just let this guy do whatever the hell he wants to do. And Joe Kelly took the character and did all the fourth wall breaking and all the ridiculousness that we know about Deadpool today. And I believe it probably was influenced by the early 1990s Lobo. I can't prove that, but I feel that's probably true. And think about, why is DC wanting to do a Lobo movie? Well, it makes sense because Deadpool was such a juggernaut at the box office. It only had a budget of $58 million, but it went on to make $783 million. If you do the math, that's 13.5 times the budget. So in Hollywood, to make a profit, you usually have to make about 3 times to 3.5 times what it costs you to make a profit. So if you make 13 times, almost 14 times, you're talking about some serious money based on the little bit of amount that you put in and the amount that you got back. And think about it as well. Deadpool did not play in China. China is the second largest movie audience in the world after the United States. And it's crucial for a lot of movies to play in China, but China has a limit of how many foreign films are going to play there in a year. In addition, they're going to be PG-13 usually because China is very conservative about what they expect for their citizens to be able to see. Well, officially anyway, there's always a black market. But in terms of what they want the images of their people to be able to see. And Deadpool is just way too raunchy for Chinese standards or at least what the Communist Party is going to allow into China. So you're talking about Deadpool would easily make $1 billion if they found a way to tone it down, but it wouldn't been true to the character, and it wouldn't be this big behemoth that they could franchise, which Fox is going to do forever and all the spinoffs, etc. So keeping it rated R long term is going to be the best thing for the property. So Warner Brothers is watching this just like everybody else has watched it. So you have to think, they have this character that's an anti-hero, breaks the fourth wall, is completely ridiculous. It's a spoof of comic book movies, which needed to be spoofed in the first place. And we have Lobo, which probably influenced Deadpool in the first place. The Joe Kelly version, that is. Why don't we do something with this character? We have it. We've owned it forever. We're free and clear. The rights are with us. So yes, you should pursue that. But you should pick the right person to do it if you're going to do it. And that's where I'm going to get into the details about Micheal By. Micheal By, you should know who he is. He's best known as the director of all 5 of the Transformer movies. He's also the producer of the reboot of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And he's the guy that's best known for personally ruining your childhood. He's mishandled these great properties, such as the Turtles, such as the Transformers, which we're going to get into, because it seems like the tone that he's taking when he's making these movies is he's aiming them at 12-year-old boys. So if you're not a 12-year-old boy, you're going to watch these projects and your brain cells are going to feel like they're going to melt. So, for example, look at how stupid he thinks his audience is. Once again, I guess he's aiming at 12-year-old boys, which I'm trying to reconcile what we're seeing and what I think he's going for. But we have to discuss just how bad this is. For example, in one of the movies, Bumblebee literally pees on a human. We got robot piss. We have Optimus Prime saying, Bumblebee, stop lubricating the man. We got robot pee. How is that funny? How does that make the Transformers a better movie? We got another scene where there's a robot, I can't remember his particular name, he's in battle, and we see what appears to be these metal balls hanging down, and they are literally looking like robot testicles, and one of the characters makes a reference about a scrotum or something like that. Once again, why are we getting this type of material? If you're going to have laughs in the movie, you can have them, but be a little more clever than that. Once again, 12-year-old boys, I guess. The first couple of movies we got, the lead character was Shia LaBeouf, whatever the hell his name is. You know, I can't pronounce it for nothing. Leave me a link in the comments about how it's properly pronounced. I don't care. I don't like that guy anyway. But besides the point, the lead character in the first couple of movies being Shia LaBeouf, he's a whiny, narcissistic, neurotic man baby. And then in the future movies, he was replaced by Mark Wahlberg, what do you want to call him, who also was a whiny, neurotic, narcissistic man baby who loses his cool at the slightest provocation. So the material seemed to be aimed at 12-year-old boys, and we had what were grown men who act like 12-year-old boys. So maybe those characters were a avatar for who this movie was aimed at. So in addition, I understand that Hollywood does a lot of product placement. They're completely unscrupulous when this things comes. If we're talking about this particular subject, it happens. I understand that. But the Transformers movies took product placement to a hilt of where I had never seen before, where they were completely shameless. For example, the Department of Defense wanted to make sure that the military was presented very bravely, and they actually paid, money for this. It's an undisclosed amount, but this is where your tax money is going, to fund a commercial film to depict the military in a good light. and they want to basically use it as a recruitment tool, showing how cool the armed forces are. I'm a patriot guy. I served in the Army before, but this right here is it's kind of bait and switch because the public doesn't know that this is basically a commercial that the Army has paid for within a movie. So if you've seen a ad saying join the Army or join the Navy, whatever, you understand it's an ad, and it's your choice to accept, hey, do I like the image of what they're presenting here? Am I a person who's interested in potentially joining the military, the service? But when it's put into a movie, it becomes sort of like propaganda more than, entertainment. So it's propaganda recruitment instead of just entertainment where they're using the military. So if you look at the Transformers movies, you're going to see them flying the flag. Old Glory is always whipping in the wind. The military is an upstanding character. There's no jokes about them. They're all about getting the job done. And I have no problem with that. If you want to present the military that way in the course of the film. But if the military paid for that and they're using it for propaganda, that one gets a little, I wouldn't say shady, but I don't have a little better word to discuss how I feel about that. So I know that's like a nuanced answer about that particular thing about it in terms of product placement for the military per se. And I know it can be nuanced and not always clear, and it can be controversial, but I don't really feel that the military should be spending their money in that type of way in a film to try to make the military look good. So they actually tried the same thing with the Avengers, and the Avengers wrote a script that the military didn't like, so the military decided not to invest in the movie for the Avengers, and that worked out well, so they could present the story they want to tell rather than bending the story to make the military look good, because they were paid to do so. So anyway, also another product placement that's over the top is that the Transformers all morph into General Motors cars. If you hadn't noticed that, they're all going to be Dodge Chargers and all types of things like that. And General Motors actually paid for that right. So the Transformers aren't going to morph into a Toyota or a Lexus or a Lincoln town car. They're all General Motors, and General Motors paid for that right. So that's more money was going into the coffers for the studio. And I think one of the worst things in terms of product placement was Stanley Tucci's character is playing with a new technology, and it actually morphs into a Beats by Dre pill. I mean, a literal commercial for Beats by Dre within a movie. It doesn't get any worse than that in terms of product placement. And he actually says the pill, it's a commercial. Come on, product placement, if you're going to have it, make it just a little more subtle than crap like that. And let's break down the results of the Transformers throughout the years since it's been presented in 2007. And Micheal Bay has directed all of these, by the way. It's been his vision, it's been his baby, and you're going to see some mixed results. So we're going to go over how much the budget was, how much they made, and the fan score for Rotten Tomatoes. So strap in, that's what we're going to discuss right now. This is the fan score when I give you that breakdown. Not what the critics saw, because obviously the critics were not too happy about the Transformers, understandably. Like, oh, another one of these movies again. Oh, good gosh. You know what I mean? But what the fans who paid money to go see it actually thought. So here we go. The first Transformers movie had a budget of $150 million. It made $709 million worldwide. That's a pretty good return. The Rotten Tomatoes score was 85%. So it made big bank in terms of how much they put into it as opposed to how much they made. And the fans overall were pretty happy. But you got to think about it. It's the first real Transformers live action movie. It's the first time they had the real CGI. So there was a lot of nostalgia of, here's the first time we're really seeing the Transformers displayed in a movie looking the way it's supposed to, because the CGI has always been very, very good in terms of how the Transformers are turning in from the robots into vehicles. I had a problem with any of that. All of that looked very good. It's just the story itself. So the next Transformers movie, Part 2, cost $200 million to make, and it made $836 million worldwide. Okay? And the fan score was 57%. And that's not a bad number overall, though. So you can see that it made more money. They spent more money, but they made more money. It kind of balanced out. They made just a little bit more money than the first one. And the Rotten Tomatoes score went down from 85 to 57%. So once again, pay attention to that as we move on to the third one. Transformers number 3 had a budget of $195 million. And this one made $1.1 billion at the box office. It had a fan score of 55%. So the budget was give or take about the same, but it made about $300 million more than the previous one did. But the fan score went down 2%, went down a little bit, but not that much. So obviously they're rolling with house money at this point, and the studio is obviously very happy with having Micheal By on board. He just made them a $1 billion movie for material that's aimed at 12-year-old boys that just makes your head just explode watching this stuff. If you watch it more than one time, you're like, oh, good gosh, this is not good. It's sort of like watching the prequels of the Star Wars or something like that. Okay, so that brings us to Transformers number 4. It had a budget of $210 million. It also made $1.1 billion. But the fan score went down to 51%. So you're seeing the fan score continually to slide. And right now, the amount of money they're making is still going up or holding it right around $1.25 billion, which is, the studio's happy with that. So around this time, the studio kind of knew they kind of had a problem in terms of the public image of this franchise. So after the fourth one, they decided to have this consortium and brought in all these great creators, Robert Kirkman, etc., people like that. They all came in, were consultants, and it was like a think tank on how to make the Transformers better. All the people that love the Transformers, like myself, are thinking, okay, why do you need all these heavy hitter guys to come in for a think tank? The obvious answer is fire Micheal By, get a new director. So they will go through all of this stuff. They pitch all these ideas. And at the end of the day, the studio says, we're keeping Micheal By. So why did you even do all of this stuff? And everyone's sitting there groaning like, oh, good gosh. And, the studios, they are risk averse. They got something that's made them $1 billion before. They think they have a little problem. So for PR purposes, they have this little group think tank thing, and I'll post a link in the description. And at the end of the day, they decide to keep the status quo, which brings us to Transformers number 5. They spend $217 million, and guess what? This time, it only makes $605 million worldwide. So the budget is at its highest ever, and it only makes half of what the previous 2 movies had made. In addition, the fan score went down to 45%. So let's start with the fan scores only. Transformers 1, fan score 85%. Part 2, 57%. Part 3, 55%. Part 4, 51%. Part 5, 45%. So every one of these movies, the actual fan score actually went down. That should be telling you something. And then after these fans who are slowly getting more and more tired of Transformers. There's no nostalgia about it anymore. Hey, we're into the fifth one. You know, those 12-year-old boys who liked it in 2007 have grown up, but you're still telling 12-year-old jokes. And they're telling the new 12-year-olds, because they're now, you know, these 12-year-old boys now are, this is over 10 years now. So those 12-year-old boys are now 22. So the 22-year-old boy is like, you know what, I liked Transformers when I was a kid, but this has gotten pretty ridiculous. And they're telling other 12-year-olds now that they're 22, why would you want to see Transformers? It sucks. So those new 12-year-olds will listen to 22-year-olds who saw it for the first time, and they're probably like, okay, yeah, you're probably right. It does suck. So everybody stays home. It makes half the money they're supposed to make. And the point I'm making is that the WB, who are the owners of the DC properties, who are interested in making a Lobo movie, just pay attention to what happened with Micheal Bay's last movie in terms of the Transformers. You spent over $200 million and you got $600 million back. Like I said, you got to make 3 times your money to make a profit. So they made somewhat of a profit, but you also have to figure in a franchise that big. They're going to throw in more marketing and promotion that they probably ever did. So that movie probably broke even, and because people finally got tired of it. So this is the guy with these declining results that you're going to put in charge of Lobo, which is supposed to be, if they do it the way they're supposed to, a hard R, raunchy action comedy. When you have a guy who has done PG-13, 12-year-old stupid comedy, I don't see the real type of fit here. That does Micheal Bay really get this character or not? That's the thing that I'm not quite sure. Now, in Micheal Bay's defense, he's not an idiot. He's making movies at people he thinks are idiots or 12-year-old boys. Because his breakout movie was in 1995, which was Bad Boys, which starred Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. It had 2 African-American leads, and Sony was the studio that was going to put this out. And they were against that idea. They didn't think that they could market this movie worldwide the way they wanted to if both of the lead characters were black. And they were pressuring Micheal Bay to, you know, make a change, and which would ruin the movie because the chemistry between Martin and Will Smith really worked. That was what really made the movie. And they pressured Micheal Bay to make a change, but Micheal Bay said, no, I'm sticking to my guns. These are the 2 characters that will be played by, you know, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. And if the studio would have got their way, let's face it, Will Smith would have stayed, but Martin Lawrence probably would have got replaced. It's pretty much that simple. But he sticks to his guns. The studio says, okay, they concede. They make the movie. It was on a $19 million budget. It made $141 million. So you can see it made a lot of money. If you adjust that to inflation, that's like having a $40 million budget and making around $300 million. So you're making about 7.5 times more than what it costs you to make it. So Micheal Bay became a real power player after Bad Boys, and Will Smith, that was his first real leading role as an action hero, as that leading type of man in 1995, and then Independence Day in 1996. And after that, he was on his way. So it started really with Micheal Bay. If you think about Will Smith being this big, huge box office star through the 90s and 2000s. Not so much now. He's decreased a little bit, but, you know, that's a whole other story. But you're talking 90s and 2000s, Will Smith was the guy. You know, he was the biggest, you know, action star in Hollywood. And start with Micheal Bay. So I gave him props for that. And he made movies like The Rock and stuff like that, which, you know, The Rock was pretty good. But by the time he got to the Transformers, he ruins it. And then he produces Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which we're also going to talk about. Because the Turtles did not perform well at all. The first one was made for $135 million. It only made $245 million. So that's a loss actually for the studio. They made part two of it for a budget of $131 million, and it too made around about $245 million or so. So both of the Turtles movies underperformed and actually lost money. So in addition, the Rotten Tomatoes scores were 51% on the first one and 47% on the second one. So once again, we have a Rotten Tomatoes score that's going down. There were a whole bunch of potty jokes and potty humor and stuff like that in the movies, and they did not perform at all, and the Rotten Tomatoes scores went down. So if you look at his track record, you're seeing declining results of, does this guy really knows what he's doing with these well-known properties, and would you give him Lobo? I mean, I don't feel very confident that this is the type of guy you want. Right now, as I told you in a previous video, that DC has cleaned house. They hired a new president of DC Films for the superhero universe, which is Walter Hamada. He came over from the horror genre, so he worked on movies like The Conjuring and It, and he took small budgets and made big bank. I made a video specifically about that. I'll put a link in the description about the new DC president. And Deadpool fit that same mantra of what he's done before, or is it mantra? I can't remember. So Deadpool really fit that idea of having a small budget and making big bank, which is what Walter Hamada had been doing for a while. So he probably can appreciate that. And they say, hey, we got characters very similar in Lobo. Instead of a mercenary in the Earth, he's a mercenary type of guy in space. That's pretty much the only real difference in terms of character motivation. So it tells me that DC has really learned nothing in terms of picking people for the right fit. They're looking for the money. Obviously, it's about the money. It's all about the money at the end of the day. But you got to have the right fit, because if you have the right fit and you make the right project and it's good, you're going to make more money. Look at it from this perspective. The Hulk is the lowest rated Rotten Tomatoes score movie that Marvel has done out of 17 films. And guess what? It's the lowest earning movie that Marvel has done in 17 films. The Avengers is the highest rated movie they've done in 17 films. It's also the highest box office movie they've had since they've been doing these films. So there is a direct correlation in comic book movies between good and how much money you make. You make a good movie, you make more money. Wow, what a freaking concept. And that's what DC got wrong, because in terms of fit, they were wrong for picking Zack Snyder. I could go into all types of details about why that did not work. For me, number one, he's a hard R, really, really super over the top violent type of director. So the stuff he did, like Sucker Punch and 300, that should let you know, and of course Watchmen, that should let you know that he loves violence, and he loves the violence way over the top, like R-rated, blood-swirling violence. But they were right for those type of materials that he was doing, for those type of projects. It wasn't right for Superman. Superman is your Boy Scout, truth, justice, and the American way. And Zack Snyder turned him into this much darker character that people didn't recognize. No, you can't have a bright red and blue Christopher Reeve saving, kittens from trees type of things. The character's got to be updated, but Zack Snyder went way, way too far, because Superman is basically spending the whole movie not trying to be Superman. So if you watch the first Man of Steel movie, which is about 2 hours and 20 minutes or so, he spends about an hour and 45 minutes resisting his fate and trying not to be Superman until his hand is actually forced. So you have a character that's not proactive, but who is reactive. So everything happens to him. He doesn't make things happen. Things happen to him. He has to react. And that continued in Batman versus Superman. So the tone and the overall darkness for the character just didn't work. And that's the mistake that DC made, in a nutshell. And now we got things coming out that Zack Snyder didn't just quit because of his daughter's untimely death, but they had actually fired him before that even happened. So that whole thing turned into a mess, and they set back their universe over 10 years. So they had to be very particular about how they're going to move forward. Are they going to do a connected universe? Is Batman still going to be played by Ben Affleck? All these questions, it just gets kind of crazy. So if you're going to do a character like Lobo, yes, you should do one. And yes, there's a precedent that people want to see, a Merc with a mouth telling jokes and this real over-the-top type of outlandish, ludicrous type of material, and people do want to see it. But it's got to be the right fit, and Micheal Bay is the exact wrong fit. And you can't see that up front to even discuss this, to even have the idea of potentially hiring him to do this work with his declining sales and his stupidity in terms of storytelling. It's just so wrong on so many levels. And I'm going to tell you, Warner Brothers, you should hire me as a consultant, okay? My email is comicpower2016@gmail.com. If you guys are listening, because I can save your butt and save you millions of dollars in losses and add millions of dollars in profits to you if you just listen to what I'm saying. The person that you want to get for Lobo, it took me 30 minutes to just get to this point, right? The person that you want to get is Tim Miller. He's the original director of Deadpool in the first place. So Ryan Reynolds, is getting a lot of credit, as he should, for being the guy who was steering getting Deadpool made in the first place when Fox didn't want to make it. However, he was partnering in terms of the vision in the very beginning with the small budget with Tim Miller, who's just as responsible for making Deadpool this big, huge smash that it became. He's just as responsible for it as Ryan Reynolds. However, for part 2, they decided to get a new director because Ryan Reynolds and Tim Miller couldn't agree in terms of creatively how to move forward with Deadpool 2. So if there was a schism, of course the studio was going to pick the star because he's the star of the movie, Ryan Reynolds, so Tim Miller was out. In saying that, that made Tim Miller available. DC should immediately jumped in and says, Tim Miller, we want you for Lobo. You did this with Deadpool. You took a budget of $50-odd million, turned it into, ridiculous amounts of money. Yeah, and Deadpool made $783 million on $58 million, by the way. So that's the guy that you want for Lobo. But if you're talking about bringing in Micheal Bay, I really don't get it. I really don't. So at the end of the day, here's where we're at. DC is interested in doing a Lobo movie. They're considering Micheal Bay to direct it. That's a horrible idea. They should be getting Tim Miller, and that's basically what I'm saying in a nutshell. However, Tim Miller right now is attached to rebooting Terminator and doing Terminator 6. I guess it's a good idea, but the Terminator doesn't really have that type of comedy to it. It's going to be more of a straightforward sci-fi action, serious, grim story. And Tim Miller coming off of Deadpool, I think that something like Lobo would have made more sense for him at this point. But that's where we are. So in a nutshell, as you can see, I'm not too happy about it. Tell me if you agree or you disagree. Does Micheal Bay sound like a good fit for Lobo? Would Tim Miller have been a better fit? Can you think of someone else who would have been a better fit for Lobo? Or should they not even be doing a Lobo story at all? So whatever you feel, if you agree with me, disagree with me, have another take on it, etc., please let me know in the comment section. This is Comic Killer 72 for Comic Power for the Rant. And I'm saying bye-bye. Peace.